Okay, in 6.1, question 7 says a few steps in the process of simplifying the given matrix to row echelon form with ones down the diagonal from upper left to lower right and zeros in the ones are shown. Fill in the missing numbers in the steps that are shown. Okay, so we're going from this initial matrix to this second one here. So we've got 1, 2, -1, -6. 2, -2, -3, 13, and 3, 4, -1, -12. And you'll notice that first row of 1, 2, -1, -6 stays the same. Now rows 2 and 3 are changing. So what this tells me is that we're multiplying row 1 by something and possibly row 2 by something to make that first entry go from a 2 to a 0. And we're combining row 1 and row 2 and putting that in place of row 2 to make that go away. Well, so if I look, I have 1 and 2 is my first entries. Okay, well, if I want to turn that 2 into a 0, then that means that 1 above it that I'm going to combine it with has got to turn into a -2. So what I'm really doing is I'm taking that top row and I'm multiplying it times a -2. So that gives me -2, -4, 2, and +12. So what I did is I took this first row right here and I multiplied it times -2. I'm not writing it down, I'm leaving it the same. I'm going to change row 2. But I need to multiply that first row times -2, which gives me -2, -4, 2, and 12. And then I'm going to combine it with row 2, which is 2, -2, -3, and 13. And that will give me this part right here. So -2 and +2 gives me a 0, which we have. -4 and -2 gives me -6, which we have. Okay, then I have 2 and -3 is going to give me -1. That's my first box right there. And then 12 and 13 are going to give me 25 in that second box right there. So that's going to give me -1. And this is going to give me 25. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing concerning now row 1 and row 3, but this time I'm not going to multiply times, I'm not going to multiply the top row times -2. I need the 3 to make a 0, so that means I'm going to need to multiply this top row times -3. So that's going to give me a -3, a -6, a +3, and a +18. And I'm going to combine that with the bottom row, that third row, that 3, 4, -1, and -12. And sure enough, that's going to give me a 0, which I see. -6 and 4 is -2, which I already have. And so that next box is going to give me a +2. And that last box then is going to give me 6. So I'm going to put in a 2, and I'm going to put in a 6. Check that answer. It tells me good. Now I've got to go from there to the next part. Okay. You can see that somewhat at the top. I'm going to go ahead and give you, see if I can plug in that next part underneath there. Okay. May have to work on that a little bit there. Okay. So what we have is, I'm moving around a little bit up. There we go. Okay. What we have is an arrow that goes from here, this one down here. Okay. So this has a -1 in it right now. This has a 25. We found those. This has a 2 and this has a 6. So let's see what has happened now. Okay, well, if you'll notice, this 0, -2 right here has stayed the same. Okay, so that means this is probably going to be a 2 and a 6 right here. But we're having to fix that middle one. Okay, so we're going to go from a 0, -6, -1, 25 to it stays 0. That's fine, but now it's going to turn into it's going to go from being a -6 to a +1. Okay, so what can we do with that? Well, I could divide by that middle row by -6. Okay, so I can turn that into a 1. So let's try that. I know if I take 0, -1, -6, -1, 25, and I multiply that times -1/6, okay, that will give me 0. That'll give me a +1. It'll give me a +1/6, and that'll give me a -25/6. So we're thinking that in that box, I should have 1/6 and -25/6. And then we're going to leave that with it's 2 and 6, because we're not showing that we did anything with that right there. And that is correct. Okay, and that takes care of question 7.